Just a quick note, former President Jimmy Carter holding a live news conference right now talking about the cancer that he is struggling with and how he's going to have to cut back his public schedule. I know a great many Republicans are just terribly disappointed about that. But Mr. Carter, of course, well into his 90s, was commenting about the fact that, he got to 80 and then 85 and then 90 without any serious health issues, and now pointing out that maybe it is time to slow down. We'll have more details perhaps on that coming up a little bit later in the program, as well as if I get an opportunity today, I've got to share with you just some thoughts about that latest video from Planned Parenthood. It just absolutely, I don't know. There's a story today that I happened to see at Pathos, which is a website devoted to faith issues. And the writer says, we've reached that point any longer where we can be horrified by anything. I mean, we're beyond, we've been desensitized to violence and so many horrors because of what we've seen on our TV sets and what we see on the internet and what we hear on the streets. And that perhaps that's the reason why more people are not terribly offended and calling for the complete end to this organization. I want to get to that a little later, as I pointed out as well. But first, I've got to share a couple of things with you. The folks who have been working on this effort in the Magic Valley to bring an end to the College of Southern Idaho's refugee resettlement program. They have a closed website. That is, certain people cannot see it. That is it's done for a reason, that there's always security concerns among people. After that situation in Texas, where Pamela Geller was nearly killed, and in fact, you had a couple of Islamic extremists, and that may be, let's face it, that may be an oxymoron. The fact of the matter is they drove 1,000 miles to try to kill her and wreak havoc on a contest, the Draw the Prophet Muhammad contest she was having, where they could have just stayed home and ignored it. But, of course, they can't do that because they're commanded otherwise. We've got people in this organization on the local level who are keeping a low profile for that very reason, and some are worried, too, that it's going to have an impact on their work lives. You've got people out there in the employment industry or, employers who would say, well, I don't want you here. You're too controversial. You've got things like that can happen. Having a set of beliefs anymore can get you in serious trouble in this country. Believe me, I know. I've been there a few times. 61809, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I want to thank them because they have granted me access to seeing some of the things that they post for discussion. And I came across this last night just before I went to bed from Refugee Resettlement Watch. Now, some of you may remember I actually played the introductory video on air, which you could hear the audio, and that was probably fine because from Ann Corcoran at Refugee Resettlement Watch, she's located in Minnesota. And a great many people obviously have watched that video because they've turned around and sent it back to me by their email accounts. And it has gained a lot of traction, but she explains in about 4 minutes what her concerns are and why she is concerned about essentially what is the dumping of these people. And if you were listening to the Fox newscast just a few minutes ago, 21,000 Muslim refugees have showed up on the shores of Greece in recent weeks. Now, Greece is a country that's a basket case. It can't take care of its own. People have been abandoning their children because they can't care for them any longer, dumping them on the state, but the state can't pay for these children any longer. And now you've got 21,000 Islamic refugees who are just showing up on the beaches and being very disruptive. And if you heard in the 8 o'clock news, there's an effort between Greece and Macedonia to basically turn these people back around and shoo them away. Now people will say, well, that's mean-spirited. Well, if you can't feed your own, how in blazes can you feed these people? And that's a question I think we all are going to have to answer at some point, because if we do get a chance, I'll tell you about some of the economic indicators a little later in this program. Once more, not good news. Not good news. So we could be facing something along these lines too. Refugee Resettlement Watch has this headline: Idaho, why might Senator Crapo have sounded so squishy at recent town hall meetings? Ann Corcoran writing this piece, and of course it's her website, and as I say, a lot of people have watched her video, and it is very telling when you listen to it, but she's explaining a little bit about this. I'll just hopscotch through this article that she has put together. She writes, remember we told you that a big meatpacking plant is planned for a small town near Boise. Well, what do you know? It seems that one of Senator Crapo's largest donors in recent years is one of the agribusiness companies involved. She writes, "We have been chronicling for years the role big meat is playing in changing or colonizing small-town America, from Nebraska to Kansas to Iowa to Colorado, just to name a few states getting slammed. From a meatpacker's point of view, this is a great business model. They pay cheap wages for what amounts to slave labor, and you, the taxpayer, subsidize the immigrant family with welfare payments for food, housing, schooling, and health care." And then she goes on to write, "J.R. Simplot Company and Cavanaugh's beef packers are planning to build the new Idaho beef processing plant." And I'm going to flip through this a few pages and then pick this up a little bit later. She writes, "Cavanaugh's Beef Packers is a private family-owned company headquartered in Amarillo, Texas. The company operates processing plants in Amarillo and in Hereford, Texas." She writes, "We have written about Amarillo for years. The city is completely swamped with refugees. They've come to work at the meatpacking plants in that city," and she says the mayor is now begging for relief. The number 2 contributor, she writes, of the top 5 to Senator Mike Crapo's campaign committee from 2009 to 2014 is, guess who? J.R. Simplot Company. So she breaks this down and says that simply Crapo is caught between a rock and a hard place. His constituents are saying no, no, no. His donors may be saying yes, yes, yes. So which one is he going to follow? Well, if you ignore the donors, then you don't pick up the campaign cash. And if you don't have the campaign cash, then you can't go out and purchase television commercials, radio commercials, and advertising on the internet and newspapers that portray your opponents as being loopy. And if you can't portray your opponent as being loopy, you might not get reelected, because your opponent may then sell his or her soul to the highest bidder and then turn around and call you loopy. So he is in that situation where he's got to stand there and say to his constituents, "Oh, well, I think it's a wonderful thing, and we're compassionate, and et cetera, et cetera." And then people raise their questions. "Well, yeah, I might consider a moratorium. Hey, look at the time. I've got to run." And that's what you're getting from a great many people in elective office because of all of this. I tell you, we are living in a very frightening time when they are more beholden to the people who fund the campaigns than they are their own constituents, and when your own safety and security as a constituent becomes secondary. 8:14, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Do you know what they did in Slovakia? That is one half of the former Czechoslovakia. I have a friend, he married a young woman from that country many, many years ago. She was a real sweetheart. She was very much in love with being an American. She learned English. She got fluent in English, almost to the point she didn't have an accent. I remember we took her to her very first 4th of July, Independence Day fireworks display, and she was just overwhelmed by what a great country America is. Before I get to my first caller, let me just share this. A website called Muslims Worldwide says Slovakia is going to be accepting only Christian migrants from Syria. Only Christian migrants from Syria. An Interior Ministry spokesman said, quote, "In Slovakia, we don't have mosques. We only want to choose the Christians," unquote. Gee willikers, they must be haters, huh? We have a caller. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But what's on your mind?
Good morning, Bill. There's a great new book out. I got it and couldn't put it down. It's by Glenn Beck. It is about Islam, and he goes into the 13 deadly lies about Islam, that it's a peaceful religion, et cetera, et cetera. Sharia law is safe from, will never come to America. Islam is not much different than Christianity. He just outlines the whole thing. It's available. I got my copy for $8.99 at Costco. So folks out there, there's no reason for you not to really be able to study into this subject. I mean, the list price is $14.99, probably at most all of the bookstores available. But get a copy and study what this real problem is. And Glenn Beck has just done. In fact, he only puts his name on it, not the people that have actually put the research together because of safety reasons. He mentioned that on the air. But I would recommend people the Glenn Beck's new book. It is about Islam for everyone. It's well referenced, well documented, goes into the whole world domination that they want, either by terrorist jihad or immigration population jihad. Either way, they win, we lose.
And thank you for the call. And we have a great many people who are serving in political office, I'm sure, who understand this. But again, money is trumping, no pun intended, money is trumping their overall beliefs, their own beliefs in many cases. So the point of the matter is, money is going to be our downfall. I mean, we've been warned that from a biblical perspective, but then a great many of them pretty much have shunted aside all of that because, well, that Bible is mean-spirited and hateful too, as many of you know. We've been hearing a lot of that over the course of the last 15, 20 years in this country, with a growing chorus trying to stamp that out. Meanwhile, I have this as well. This comes from one of these websites, also Muslim Worldwide, and it reads 1.8% Muslim population in Norway, so it's small, right? In 2011, Norwegian authorities reported that 100% of all rapes in the capital of Oslo were committed by immigrants, of which roughly 90% were committed by Muslim immigrants. And then it says when you get to 2 to 5% of a population that's Islam, it says you start seeing recruiting from jails and among street gangs. And it says in Germany, with 5.4% Muslim population, this is happening. 3.3% in Britain, it's happening. 4% in Maine, it's happening. 4.6% in Thailand, it's happening. Then it goes on to say Islam's effect on society when it reaches 5 to 9%. Well, they start pushing for the introduction of halal, that means Islamic food, in grocery stores, and demanding that the stores comply, otherwise they'll picket and they'll bring it on the media, and the media will say, oh, mean. So that's happening in France with an 8% Muslim population, Philippines with 5%, Sweden with 5%, Australia with 6%, and Belgium with a population of 6% Muslims. And it just goes on with some of these things. And then it points out in Sweden, where they have 5% Muslim population, 77.6% of total rapes in the country are committed by Muslim immigrants. Here's another. When Muslims reach 10 to 19% of a population, there were uprisings and threats, such as in Amsterdam, where you had a cartoonist who was killed because they said that he had offended the Prophet Muhammad. And then they list the countries where this is taking place. Even in Russia, where they have a 15% Muslim population, Vladimir Putin has had to resort to some very draconian measures, essentially killing off all of the terrorists and then all of their not only immediate families, but all of their extended families in hopes of stopping all of this. He doesn't have to worry, though, about a constitution that limits, well, of course, in this country, we have a lot of politicians who don't bother with that either, don't we? After 20%, usually nations start experiencing rioting, the burning of Christian churches and Jewish synagogues. And it lists the countries where this is happening, several of them. Islam's effect on society when they reach 40 to 60%. Militia warfare, church destruction. Boko Haram's a good example in Nigeria. After 60%, you start seeing the persecutions of non-believers of all other religions and including non-practicing Muslims. And then the writer says, at 80 to 99%, you start seeing state-run ethnic cleansing and even some genocide. And at 100%, you get something like Afghanistan being a prime example. The Islamic House of Peace, the writer says. And by the way, the only schools are Muslim schools, and the only word is Islam, and that is the law. But hey, it'll never happen here, right? Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Hey, speaking of people coming here, well, we're going to get 300 of these people, of course, in October. How about others coming here illegally? More details coming up on our program in just a couple of minutes. It's 61 at 8:20. I wanted to point out we have a new sponsor on the program. You may have heard it already over the last couple of weeks. High Desert Meat Processing processes one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you get back. No one will substitute anything. Something you might want to consider when we've got some hunting seasons on the way. Darren Van Horn, owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls, Idaho, has more than 30 years of experience in the meat business. Visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook. And when you go there, you can actually read the reviews that people have written, customers, in fact, all very positive. Give High Desert Meat Processing a call for all of your wild game and domestic processing needs. The number is 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing gets shipped out. Specialty meats such as jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa, breakfast sausage, the kielbasa, oh gosh. Well, the doctor wouldn't be happy, but you know what? He's not eating at my house. Breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, and much more, USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. The telephone number is 734-9949. My gosh, last night the Fox News Network was just chock full of all sorts of guests who were screaming and yelling about Donald Trump's proposal to end birthright citizenship in this country. Did you know, by the way, a couple of quick notes on this. Daily Caller says 2 terrorists were beneficiaries of birthright citizenship. Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed, I believe, by a drone strike in Yemen, was born in this country in 1971. Ended up, of course, coming back and preaching in this country, even though he only lived here briefly as a child and was allowed to preach all sorts of hate. And then he went off to do jihad and became an enemy of the United States. And then they mention there's a second one, too, as well, and that is Yasir Hamdi. Similar situation. He was born in Louisiana, but then his family moved back to Saudi Arabia, and these people made war on the United States. That's the benefit of birthright citizenship. Ann Coulter, writing at the very same publication today, shares this. She says that it indeed is not a guarantee in the 14th Amendment to birthright citizenship. And then she goes on to cite Judge Andrew Napolitano. Napolitano pointed out on a program, he said, look, in 1868, when we adopted that amendment, that was to ensure that freed blacks and American Indians could vote as citizens. They were here. The blacks had no choice in it, coming over here. Someone dragged them over. And the Indians were already here. So somebody said, all right, we've got to do something, the right thing for these people. But she points out back in 1868, no one was thinking, hey, we're going to do this for the children of illegal immigrants. Now, Bill O'Reilly argues there was a court case in 1985, and the court case said, yes, they are, by birthright citizenship, legally American citizens. Well, courts have been wrong before. Think Dred Scott, right? Think Dred Scott. So we often see courts making rulings, and later on, because of judicial review, things are turned around. This is, by the way, Ted Cruz, who's running for president of the United States, born in Calgary, Alberta, to an American mother and a Cuban father, appearing last night with Michael Medved on his talk show.
Absolutely. We should end granting automatic birthright citizenship to the children of those who are here illegally.
Do you think there's a realistic chance to change the Constitution on this?
I think it is possible, but any constitutional amendment by its nature is difficult.
All right, it's difficult. So trying to round up 38 states or so to actually, go along with this would be difficult. However, public pressure is growing to the point where it might be able to happen. But number two is a new challenge in court could end up with judicial review and could end up with an overturning of the 1985 ruling. We have a caller with us. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX at 827. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning, Bill. You know, what Trump did, all Trump's trying to do is maybe help the country. And it amazes me how people are climbing up his back because all he does is says something that will help the country. It's like these immigrants coming to Twin Falls you were talking about a little bit ago. They need to be sat down and say, look, this is the world you're moving into. You're going to see pigs. You're going to see beef. You're going to have dirt in the air. It's going to be cold in the wintertime. But see, what's going to happen is they're going to come to town, and all you little lily-livered lovers out there are going to want to give them everything they want, give them everything they think they need, and guess who's going to pay for it? Me.
Yeah.
Now, that's why I'm getting pissed. That's why I've had a gut full of this crap. People are sitting at home. I know them today. A lot of them are in my families. They're a bunch of jerks. They're sitting there waiting for their welfare to show up next week on the 1st. They're sitting, they don't do nothing. They do nothing but complain. They do nothing but bitch because Donald Trump is this and Donald Trump is that and the government's this, the government's that. But they'll sit there with their hands out. There's people right now out here fighting these fires, trying to put them out to save people's homes. You see these people lining up to volunteer to go out there to try to help? Hell no. But they'll sit there and bitch and wait for everything to come to them. And all Donald Trump's trying to do is save this country. Now, am I endorsing Donald Trump? No, I'm not. Do I like Donald Trump? Yes, I do. But by God, I let the man say what he wants, because nothing he said so far is going to hurt this country. It's going to affect other countries that are taking advantage of this country. And then by God, until people stand up and put on a pair of pants and pull their boots up and stand up for what they believe in, this country's going to sink, folks. And guess what? You have a lot to do with it.
I thank you much. Hey,
thank you.
Yeah, I got to run, but I thank you. See, that's the type of passion that we need. People need to, and they need to share this with those other elected politicians who are trying to shirk the responsibilities. And the majority, by the way, is starting to find out, yes, it does rule. Not necessarily all of these little minorities who say, bake me a cake, or I want to come into your country. And the media is starting to realize, too, that its job really is only to report facts, that they don't run the country as well. Trump's been giving them a good slapping around. 8:30, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I've got more on this, some other opinions coming up. All right, here's a math question for you. Let's just say Esteban and Jesus have 5 bags of heroin. They give 3 of those bags to Democrats, and then the police come and take the last 2. How many bags of heroin do Jesus and Esteban still have left? 8:34. Bill Colley with you on Top Story 62. Thanks for joining us this morning. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program by dialing 736-0300, 736-0300. Carly Fiorina, who claims that, of course, she's going to turn the country around because the former real estate salesman and then later a CEO of a large computer company, well, briefly. She says, by the way, appearing on the Kelley File last night with Martha McCallum, that no, immigrants are good people and we should just let them come flooding in.
In terms of the anchor baby issue and the birthright, that anyone who is born here becomes an American citizen. It's in the Constitution. Is that something we should change, in your opinion?
No, it is not. It is in our Constitution. It has been in our Constitution for a very long time. And actually, it would take a constitutional amendment to change it. And so once again, what I find disturbing about this conversation a little bit is that we talk about things in election cycles, but don't really talk about what it would take to get them done. It would take a constitutional amendment to get that done. And I think it's far more important now that we focus all of our political energy on doing what we haven't done in 25 years, securing the border and fixing the legal immigration system.
There are nearly 500,000 anchor babies born in this country every year. 500,000. Think about that for a moment. We have a caller with us. You're on the air on Top Story at 8:35.
Yes, good morning, Bill. Another thing that amazes me is the fact that people coming across the border, ending up on all our benefits, and can't speak a word of English. In about 6 months, they're driving Cadillac Escalades and Suburbans, vehicles that you and I can't afford as American taxpayers.
And they can't afford that at the menial jobs many of them work, so what are they selling on the side to pay for all of that?
Well, they're getting all this money, you know. I had, about a year or two ago, I had called Boise about this situation, and they told me the cars that they're driving have nothing to do with the welfare check. I said, where do you think they're getting the money to pay for these cars?
And
of course, they're saving on the food that we're paying for.
Sure.
They're using it to buy their Cadillacs.
And they may have other sources of income, which we don't know about, perhaps underground sources. I thank you much for the telephone call, sir. And you're up next. It's 8:36 on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Bill Colley, this is a little bit off the subject you're on, but our politicians are selling us out right now in the state of Idaho. Rich and Otter are wanting to bring spent nuclear waste into Idaho to reprocess at the price of $25 million. The government gets. I think the state of Idaho gets screwed in the whole thing. You can comment on it if you want to. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe at some other point I will. First of all, I believe in nuclear power. You got to do something, though, with the remnants of it. And Yucca Mountain in Nevada would have been the ideal place, but of course there were objections there. You start deep down in there. The only worry is some terrorist might come along and try to blow up the mountain. Where would the terrorist come from? I don't know. Syria, maybe? Got a lot of options out there. 8:38. Bill Colley with you on the program this morning. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com is our website, which means you can tune in and listen live anywhere all over the country. I have a friend actually who serves in elective office in back on the East Coast, and he's coming to a conference in Las Vegas the week before Thanksgiving, and he actually wants to spend a day and drive up here and visit and see the area. He was telling me yesterday. He says, a lot of people are listening to your program online that I know of, and I thought, well, yes, there are a lot of twisted people out there. It definitely is true. We have one more caller in this segment of the program. You're on the air. You're on the air, in fact, on Top Story.
Yes, yesterday Ted Cruz said that anchor babies were not, according to the Constitution, actually, legal to be citizens. Carly Fiorina, who I think is pretty sharp, at least ways I've always felt that way, said the opposite. And then when anything goes to the Supreme Court, we've got, 5 and then 4 that interpret the Constitution differently. And you say, as simple as it is written, how can there be such different interpretations? But of course, political expediency is always seems to be,
Right.
it's just a crapshoot.
And that court in 1985 that made that decision was really a court that was put together by Lyndon Johnson and Jimmy Carter.
So,
remember that.
Like you say, I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's something. If they're just like they literally, in some cases, they're waiting to have their baby, and they come across to make sure that they have it in America. Again, if we bleed this horse to death, America, the thing that keeps this world propped up, the reason why other people can be socialists and communists, or like China, partially capitalist and communist, is because of America. If this thing drops, this is it. I just don't.
Right. Hey, I got to let you run on that note because coming up against a hard break here. 8:40, 62. Some thoughts on Planned Parenthood in just a moment in that latest awful video.